Yo, what's up guys, it's Jack and welcome back to another video. And a while back ago I made a video talking about pros versus pub stompers and who's better. And basically who's better really doesn't matter, and you can't really compare them because, and I'm going to explain why in this video. And when I explained it back then, I basically said, long story short, it was all about gun skill, but the way that I put it was kind of confusing in a sense, and I've even got some hate in the comment section in that video because, well, I was kind of a little bit all over the place with the commentary, and I kind of just basically kept on saying it doesn't matter, it's all about gun skill, and I still believe that, and I'm not going to change that in terms of my opinion. It's not like I haven't really changed an opinion, but there was something I saw on Twitter today, and it kind of reminded me of it, and basically, we're at a time now in Call of Duty, and not just that, but for other reasons that I'm going to explain, it's like we can't really compare them anymore. It really is all about gun skill, and the thing is, there are, if you look at it from both sides, there are things that pros do better, and there are things that pub players do better, and there are so many different factors that come into play. And there are, for instance, pros do it for a living. They spend an enormous amount of time playing the game, which is one of the reasons they're so damn good. They know the game in and out. But at the same time, there are also pub players that do this for a living. You know, content creators and people that stream all the time and take it seriously. Like the one that comes to mind, first and foremost, is, let's say, Pwnstars. Pwnstars.com plays this game like he literally plays Call of Duty for a living. He streams and he plays it. And, you know, the thing is, back in the day, it used to be basically, well, pros... One of the reasons pros were always better is simply because of the fact that they do it for a living and they spend so much amount of time playing the game that they're just so much better. They put more time into it, they learn the game, they play the game, etc., etc. Now, pub players also do this, and Pwnstars is the one that first off comes to mind, and there's other players that do this as well and spend a ridiculous amount of time with the game and that are extremely dedicated to it. But Call of Duty competitive is different than Call of Duty pubs. It's almost like you're playing different games, and both of them have their positives and their negatives. Or I don't even want to say negatives. They're just two different kinds of games. For instance, the pro scenes, you're playing certain maps. There are certain weapons and perks and equipment that are banned. You're only playing certain game types. It's 4v4, and it's high skill against high skill. Okay, so you can see that if you were to just compare in the back of your head, comparing it to pubs, you know, in some ways you'll actually find that in some ways pub players have it harder, in some ways pros have it harder. Let me explain this. For instance, pro players, when they play and they compete against players of similar skill, very high, very high skill level. And that's something that doesn't happen with pubs. But here's the other thing though. Most pub players that are the best of the best out there, most of the time they're going to play alone. Now, obviously, they don't always play alone, but most of the time they're going to play alone. It's 6v6. There's nothing that's banned, so therefore they have to deal with all the BS and all the randomness. And there is more randomness in the game when it's 6v6 as opposed to 4v4. And especially when you're playing on every map that the game has to offer, as opposed to maps that are built for competitive. Okay. And sometimes, even though that one pub player that's really good is going to be way better than a lot of those people that are in the lobby, sometimes you'll even run into full teams, and some of those players just being above average and playing against a full team that's just above average, and even though on a personal skill level you may be better than them, in terms of your own personal skill level, it's still really hard to get a really good score and succeed in the art of pub stomping, so to speak, when you're going up against a team of players that are above average. This is where the challenge comes in. So if you think about it from a both pro player's perspective as well as a pub player's perspective, there's challenges to be had. Now, granted, pub players don't usually have that high level of challenge all the time, but they like to challenge themselves in different ways. For instance, some pub players will play with a weapon that's a lot weaker, or they'll take away certain perks. Like, for instance, they won't play with Black Ops 2 dexterity, or they'll play without toughness or something like that, or they'll play with a much weaker weapon on purpose to challenge themselves. There are players, such as Pwnstars, for instance, that actually do this to challenge themselves, to make themselves better. Sometimes they'll even go to the extremes and play a few games without aim assist and things like that. And or sometimes they won't. They'll tear the paddles off of their scuff controllers, so they won't be at any sort of advantage or whatnot. And they'll just play with a regular controller and stuff like that. Marker J made a video on this where he took the paddles off of his scuff controller or whatnot. So, and by the way, in my opinion, he also proved a point. And controllers are great, and they could take you further than you've ever been before. But at the same time, it's not always the end all be all. Game knowledge and gun skill and things like that and decision making are more vital than that. But if you're competing against players at a similar level, there's no reason to have a disadvantage over them, and you might as well play with a scuff. But anyway, if you look at it from every single perspective, and again, I don't want this video to be like 2 hours long, but as you can see, and there's more examples of this to where, the pro players are definitely have it harder, and then there's some other scenarios that pub players have it harder. And I'm not, my decision, my point of view still stands from the previous video and things that I've always said. And that is that it doesn't matter what form of Call of Duty you play. It's all about gun skill. The gun skill is where the person will prosper over the other. It's the gun skill, it's the decision making, etc., etc. So when you look at it from all angles, you'll see that there's plenty of differences and plenty of similarities, and you will come to see more and more that there really is no reason to compare them. And you can't really sit here and tell me that if Marker J, for instance, okay, I'm just using him as an example, if Marker J wanted to make a transition to play pro, now he would have to make a quite big transition. He's going to have to get used to the game types. He's going to have to get used to playing on a team and doing callouts and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of gun skill, and if he learned all those other things, that would take some time. But with his gun skill and all that stuff and his base and the knowledge and experience that he has from playing Call of Duty already, even though they're not the same game types or whatnot, you can't tell me that a man like that can't compete in a pro setting if you wanted to. Granted, at first it would be a struggle because there's the transition, but after that, once you reach a certain level of gun skill, and this has been said before, once you reach a certain level of gun skill, what ends up happening is you kind of qualify to at least give competitive a shot. Because if you're dominating pubs, then that automatically is a sign that, hey, maybe if you really want to make that transition and play on that level and play those game types and play on a team, that you certainly qualify because you have the gun skill to do so. And again, like I said, I didn't want this video to be two hours long, but I just wanted to iterate on this, and and this is not a comparison video by any means. I'm not saying that pub players are better than pros. I'm not saying that pro players are better than pub players. I'm just simply trying to say that each one of them have their they have both their positives and their negatives in terms of the things and the way they play the game and what version of the game they play, etc., etc. But I will say this: if a pro player just was to all of a sudden retire and just play pubs after he's retired and all that, because that's what they wanted to do, it would be a much less of a transition. It would be far easier for them to dominate a pub lobby than it would for a really good pub player to transition to go into the pro scene. I will say that. That's for damn sure. So, but anyway, guys, that's all I wanted to say. I went way over the time in this video, so let me know what you think down in the comment section. It's again, it made for an interesting conversation, and I kind of wanted to redo a video that I made in the past. So, as always, if you enjoyed the video, let me know, and if you didn't, let me know what I could do to make my videos better, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.